talked, we were looking at Torrington's or some other town's results. Is that about average, the 283 for a town our size?
I mean, so Torrington got itself up to 511,
Oh, good for them.
which, you know, I think actually one of the ways they did it was they had their library has a newsletter, like an e-newsletter that goes out to residents. And once it got out on that, a lot of people took it that way.
Oh, that's good. That's a good idea.
They also had like a day where people came to City Hall or whatever to pay taxes. I don't know.
That's a good idea too, yeah.
And they had some posters out on that day, but I think it was the library newsletter that did it more than anything else.
Good.
Just testing that. You guys can see that, I assume. Yeah.
Yes. Jocelyn, you are the director at the Housing Collective.
I am the director of the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity.
Litchfield.
Or for short, you could just call me your planning consultant on this project. Hi, Nick. Pam, do you live stream all your meetings? The P and Z meetings?
We do. Yep.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
And we have to hold on until the Ukrainian army frees us. Tonight in Ukraine, wishful thinking that history won't repeat itself. Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News, Lviv, Ukraine.
Doesn't it seem like Zoom should have created some exciting game you can play when you're waiting for meetings to start?
Right.
Have you ever,
Or
do you
some
have
nice
that,
music,
sorry,
or some nice music.
hold music? Yeah, I guess. We might all disagree on what music we want to.
Yeah, no, nice music.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Before we start, Pinky Mangione had a conflict, so she will not be attending this evening.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Are you sure she's not here on her iPad? I see Sally's iPad.
okay, maybe she. Okay, she had said earlier today that she wasn't going to be able to attend, but guess she's figured out how to do Zoom. Okay, sorry about that.
So what do you guys think? Are we going to give folks a couple more minutes? Is that?
Maybe just a few.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a couple. It's just.
We all have halos behind us. We have a light behind us. We all have halos.
For one.
Halos.
Well, look at them. I got one. Katie's got one. Who else?
Is there a big,
Jocelyn's got one.
Christine's got one. Yeah.
Christine's got one.
has there been a big sign up list?
For tonight's meeting?
Yes.
There wasn't pre-registration.
Oh, there wasn't. Okay.
No.
Hi, Pam.
Hello.
here we are, peace and quiet, without the Ukraine unbelievable situation, huh?
Yeah.
Terrible.
It's hard to watch for sure.
Well, what do you think? Should we get going? Yeah.
I say go, let's go.
All right, you want me to kick it off, Jocelyn?
Yes, please.
Good evening. I am Mayor Todd Archulowski, and I'd like to welcome you to the Winchester Housing Plan Steering Committee's Community Informational Meeting. Tonight, we'll learn about the municipal housing plan that Winchester is currently developing. You may ask yourself, why does Winchester need a housing plan? Quite simply, affordable housing is a concern for every community, large and small. We need to ensure that we have housing available that not only meets our needs, but is affordable. Our housing plan will not only look at the housing needs of our senior population, but also the housing needs of single parents and young families just starting out. Affordable housing is not only the backbone of a vibrant community, but it's the foundation of the American dream. Now I'd like to turn this over to our host, the director at the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity, Jocelyn Eyre.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, thanks for everyone who came tonight. We really appreciate your time to hear about the town of Winchester's housing plan that is in development. So what we're hoping to cover tonight is explaining, why is the town creating a housing plan, explaining a little bit about what the town's current housing stock looks like. We are going to share with you the survey results of our resident housing needs survey and the survey for community college students about their housing needs. And then we'll tell you about the next steps in the process of developing the housing plan for the town of Winchester and how each of you can provide feedback throughout the process. Just a couple things in terms of meeting protocol. As you can see, I think the meeting is being recorded so that hopefully folks who weren't able to come tonight can watch it later. We will take questions and comments and feedback from you all. We're just going to do a short presentation first. If at any time you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat box. We are going to ask folks to keep themselves muted during this first part of the conversation, just to cut down on background noise. So, but we will, if you do have questions, feel free to type them in and we'll answer them after the short presentation. So the town of Winchester has a housing plan steering committee, and you'll see here on the slide a list of all the members on that committee. The committee meets monthly on the second Wednesdays of the month at 3 o'clock, and those meetings are all open to the public. Anybody who wants to attend can attend. The agendas and minutes are posted on the town website. And I am a land use planner by background. I have worked with 6 towns in Northwest Connecticut last year to develop and adopt housing plans. And I'm currently working with 9 towns, including the town of Winchester. The goal of this steering committee for Winchester is really to, again, look at the town's housing needs and identify additional housing options that the town might need, and then really work on what the actions are that the town could take to create those needs, to create those options that are needed over the coming 5 years. So the first question we want to answer is, why are we doing this? Why are we creating a town housing plan? So one of the reasons why you and many other communities are doing this now is that the state of Connecticut did pass a law back in 2017 requiring every town in the state to have a housing plan. And those are all, every town has to have one by June 2022. The legislation that was passed says that the goal of this process is for towns to proactively think about the housing needs of current and future residents and workers, and then lay out strategies to meet those needs. And the plan does have to specify how the town will increase the number of affordable housing developments. And I'll talk on the next slide, I think, or in a couple slides about what the definition of affordable is. But really, the plan can be much broader than that in terms of thinking about the housing needs all across the spectrum, including strategies for providing housing options for people of all ages, mobilities, range of incomes, et cetera. And finally, I just want to make sure that it's clear that this housing plan, once it's developed and adopted, will be a guidance document. It won't have regulatory authority. So there may be things like zoning regulation tweaks that are suggested, but those would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their consideration after the plan is adopted. So this is a guidance document, much like your town plan of conservation and development. Just to kind of explain what is included in a town housing plan, basically you'll have an assessment of current housing needs, and that's what the steering committee has been working on for the last couple months, is assessing housing needs in the community through the surveys that we've done, which will again share the results with you, and then a data analysis, again, of your existing housing stock. And then an assessment of your existing housing stock. So sort of what are the needs, what do you have now, and then how do you want to try to meet those needs? What are your goals for the next 5 years? Typically, the housing plans do include some kind of unit creation goal. So for example, the town of Warren that I recently worked with, I believe their goal was to try to create 20 units over 5 years. The town of Salisbury wanted to try to create 35 units over 5 years. So usually there's a number goal, and those are again tied to what your needs are and what your strategies are. The strategies in these plans typically fall into sort of 3 categories. There will likely be some zoning suggestions. Typically, there are also strategies around the funding resources that would be needed to create more options or to rehab existing properties or something like that. And then there's also kind of capacity building strategies, like building up your volunteer and organizational resources to address these challenges in your town. So again, since your plan does have to address affordable housing as well as really all housing options that you might want to provide in Winchester, we want to be clear about what the definition of affordable housing is. So this is the state's definition, which is housing that's affordable to households at 80% of the area median income or less. So the table you'll see here, it shows you what 80% of the area median income, so that's the Litchfield County median, for different household sizes. And it's of course updated every year. So, and that housing can't cost those households any more than 30% of their income. So, and that kind of pie chart there sort of shows you what that 30% is. And the reason for this is that basically, if you're paying, 40, 50% of your household's income on your rent or your mortgage and utilities, there's not enough of your household budget left at the end of the month to pay for all the other things that you need, like food, clothing, transportation, healthcare. So households that are in that situation have to make tough decisions about what they can and can't pay for. And also they don't have the money left at the end of the month to go out for dinner, for example, or support local businesses. So it does have a kind of a dragging effect on the economy when too many of your households are housing cost burdened. So, for example, if you were a household in the town of Winchester of 2 people and you earned $63,000 or less, you would qualify to live in affordable housing, and that housing could not cost any more than 30% of your income. So as of the last data that we were able to access, Winchester had almost 1,955 households that were earning below 80% of the area median income. So technically you have that many households that would qualify to live in affordable housing if it was available. In terms of what's available, what you currently have in your housing stock that qualifies as affordable, this chart shows you, this is Winchester's number of affordable units, and then some of your neighboring towns, so you can kind of see that. So in total, Winchester has, by the state's list, 609 units that are affordable, which is a little over 10% of your total housing stock. So 10% of your housing stock is dedicated to remaining affordable to those, 1,900 families or households that are earning under 80% of the area median income. This is a list of some of the developments in Winchester that are affordable. Many of them are senior housing, and many of them have very long waiting lists. So these 2 properties, Chestnut Grove and Greenwood's Garden, are managed by the Winchester Housing Authority, and they have 101 households on the waiting list for those units. Carriage Maker Place and Laurel Commons are managed by another property manager, and they have an additional 33 households on their waiting list. So there is quite a long wait for folks who want to try to get into those affordable units. In addition, you do have 167 households that are getting rental assistance. So that means that they have a voucher that pays the difference between 30% of their income, what they can pay in rent, which would be 30% of their income, and the fair market rent. And then you've got 92 households who were income qualified for a subsidized mortgage through the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority or USDA. That's where you get your total number of units. So again, I think because you're in that situation where you've got, 1,900 households earning 80% of the area median income, qualifying to live in affordable housing, but you have just 609 units available, you have a situation where you've got folks paying a lot more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So in Winchester, you have 1,274 households that are considered housing cost burdened because they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And you've got 640 households that are paying more than half of their household income, more than 50% of their income on housing costs, which is considered severely cost burdened. So this represents 25% of homeowners are housing cost burdened and about 52% of renters. That's pretty similar to countywide. Countywide, folks that rent, about 50% of folks that rent are cost burdened. So the other thing that we look at when we're working with towns on housing plans is, again, kind of trying to have that full spectrum of housing options available for people who live in your town. And, Winchester does have kind of a more diverse range of housing options than many of its neighbors. But really all of our towns can do more in terms of creating some more of those different housing options other than single family detached 3+ bedroom homes, because we have a lot of that in Northwest Connecticut. And in Winchester specifically, so you've got 19% of your households that have children, but 60% of your housing stock is designed for people with children. The 60% of your housing stock has 3 or more bedrooms. And again, this is pretty common in Northwest Connecticut that our housing stock is built for families, but a majority of our households are not families with children. So, one area of focus for the housing plan could be to continue to try to have some more of those 1 and 2 bedroom options that can meet some needs for young adults and for seniors that don't need 3, 4 plus bedrooms. Another thing we look at is kind of the age of a town's housing stock. And in Winchester, 63% of your housing units were built before 1970. Obviously, old houses can look like this picture. I don't know if you guys can see they could look like this, or they can look like this. Again, depending on how much money the household has to spend to keep them updated. So most of our towns have some houses that look like this and some houses that, that look like that once they get to a certain age. So, again, one of the things we look at is there a need for programs that help keep that your existing housing stock upgraded and up to date? Because, obviously older homes are more expensive to heat, cool, and to maintain. I say as the owner of a very old house. I know. So the other thing that we look at is kind of what's happening with sales prices. Many of you know that median sales prices all over, well, really nationwide, have been increasing. This is a great thing if you are a homeowner already, but if you're a renter and you want to become a homeowner, this kind of pandemic house buying, home market situation has just made it more challenging for you to become a homeowner. So this kind of shows you the increase in median sales prices between 2016 and 2021. They've gone up quite a bit just in the last year. So the gap between what a renter household can afford in terms of a purchase price for their first home and your median sales price has been going up. And in 2021 for Winchester, that gap was $114,500. So that renter household would somehow have to come up with $114,000 more dollars than they can afford to buy your median priced home. And the other thing that we're seeing a lot of, again, all over the county, is many more young adults living in their parents' houses for a lot longer. And again, we think this is just, another sign of, a limited variety of types of housing that are available. Again, if most of what's available is a 3+ bedroom house, the cost of what's available, and then college, student loan debt making it more challenging for folks to own their first home. All right, so now Katie is going to summarize what the resident housing needs survey results were.
Right, so the housing needs survey was answered by 283 people, which was great. And of those, 60% feel that the cost of housing in town affects the town's ability to attract and retain young people and young families. 54% think that the cost of housing in town affects the ability of people who work in town to live here. 49% think the town needs programs that help with the cost of rehabilitation of older homes. As we just discussed, our inventory of older homes is pretty high. 46% think that the town needs rental housing options that young families and young adults can afford. And 46% think that the town needs first-time homebuyer options that allow renters to purchase their first home. So those are all, if you think the last three, if you just consider them to be at 50%, all of those outcomes are 50%, just about at 50% or a little higher, a little under, a little over. We asked for some comments during the survey, and this is just a few of what the comments were. Winsted needs additional affordable senior living on one floor, similar to the property on Gay Street. Keeping folks of all ages in their own homes should be considered important. We are a small family who would love to buy a home in Winsted. Over the past 2 years, I've had numerous people stop and ask me while jogging if I knew of any apartments for rent. It took me a year of looking almost to find a 3-bedroom where rent wasn't jacked up to where I couldn't pay it. And do something about blighted properties and absentee landlords. We also surveyed the student body of the community college. We wanted to see if there were students attending college that would like to live in town. And we asked the question, if you do not currently live in Winchester, would you like to live here? And 42% said yes. And there were 48 people who answered the question. And so one student said affordable student renting options would help a lot of students looking to benefit from Northwestern Community College. And another said, I believe the problem is quality housing for an affordable price. It's almost impossible to work full-time and go to school. So affordability is key and safety shouldn't be compromised.
So there is a 10-minute video that we created about a year ago when I was working with some of the other towns in Northwest Connecticut meant to show what affordable housing looks like in some of our towns, in 5 towns. And it interviews some of the volunteers that really made that housing happen, answers some frequently asked questions. I'm going to show you, it is a 10-minute video, which is a little long. So I'm going to show you just the first couple minutes of the video. And then if you want to watch the rest of it, it is at nwcthousing.org. But I'm going to share just a few minutes of that video so you can see some of the affordable housing in some of the neighboring towns. Sorry. Katie, will you yell at me if the sound doesn't work?
The Northwest Council of Governments did a study of all the towns in their region. In Washington, there's over 1,000 people who commute here to work.
People are moving away because really it doesn't make sense to live here. It's too expensive. And we're not going to change food prices. We're not going to change the gasoline prices. We can, very reasonably, provide lower cost housing.
It's been clear over the past 10 years that there's a much greater need for rental housing than we supposed.
I think the average age is something like 60, and we need to attract young families or the town will die.
The state projections are, in 20 years, by 2040, the population is going to diminish by about 22% to 2,400 people. And the population right now is about 3,500.
People need to understand that in order to have a vibrant community, one needs to have a good variety of economic incomes in it. And we need to take care of the nurses and healthcare workers, etc.
The affordable rental housing is really the entry point for a lot of these young families. But it's also a place where kids who grew up here can come back and establish themselves. The fact is that the people who move here are doing the work that otherwise they might have to drive an hour to get here. And that's essential for the town. So it benefits the town and it benefits...
Yeah, and they're paying rent. They pay it not more than a third of their income, but that's the way you can live nowadays. You can't pay more than a third of your income.
Where are we going? I mean, because this is essentially becoming, not literally, but figuratively, it's a gated community. The population here is going to drop, as I said. The strain that's going to put on local government, as they're having difficulty finding volunteers now for the fire department, EMTs.
When I was looking out, I was watching people walk out to talk, go back to their homes, check their mailboxes. They tend to look out for each other. Kent Affordable Housing built this, South Common. It opened in 2003 with 24 units. We have a range of people from a newborn who was arrived just after the family arrived to live here, up to elderly, and they work all over town. Some of them are retired. The 4 acres here, they belong to the town. It's not on the road. The entry road was built. It wasn't doing anything but sitting here. People who've lived here at Cougarman have moved on to the parcel program, been able to move into homeownership. Some have moved to Bonnybrook as they got older and needed a 1-story house. We've had a couple of high school valedictorians here. We've had members of the fire department. We've had people who work in the service trades. There are people who work as school staff. About as random as any other slice of Cornwall.
All right. If you do want to watch the rest of that video, you can find it on nwcthousing.org. And again, it just gives you some more information about what some of the other communities surrounding Winchester have been doing and answer some questions. This is our last slide, and we really just want to make sure that everyone understands what the process is going to be from here on in terms of developing the plan for the town of Winchester. We have done this, been working on the housing needs assessment, again, with the survey and the data that we've collected so far. This is tonight's forum, the Town Informational Forum. So we're kind of in the middle of the housing plan development process. The next steps are to, again, the steering committee will take a look at the housing needs that they have seen so far and consider any comments or feedback that you all have tonight and start drafting goals and strategies for a housing plan. We hope to have a draft of that out in April or May, and then we'll have another forum, which we hope many Winchester residents will attend, to present those draft goals and strategies and get your feedback on them. And then the plan will be adopted. We'll go through an adoption process with public hearings and opportunities for more input. So there is quite a few opportunities for feedback, ideas. Again, all of the Housing Plan Steering Committee meetings are open to the public. And, we do really want to have the community involved as the steering committee moves forward with developing this plan. So with that, we're happy to take any questions, comments, feedbacks you have. If you have any ideas about how the town could meet some of its housing needs, again, that's what the committee is working on next. Or any questions about the process, you can either, I'll stop sharing here. You can either put questions into the chat box, or you can, raise your hand and we can call on you. So there is a couple questions here I will read. When was the survey conducted? Who was included and excluded? Katie, do you want to answer that?
Sure. I believe, Jocelyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was conducted over a month at least back in.
Yeah, it's actually still open.
Right. And no one was excluded.
Yeah, the committee made a pretty concerted effort to try to reach as many people as possible. Some of the ways that we tried to get it out there, can you remember all of them, Katie?
Yep. In our newsletter that goes out quarterly, seasonally, there was information about it there. It was on our website. It was on our Facebook pages and all of the other Facebook pages that we're aware of that have Winstead Facebook pages. Where else did we put it?
I don't do all that kind of thing. So how would you reach people? You're not reaching people like me who don't access those.
Did you get the newsletter that we send out every three weeks for 3 months to every mailing address in Winstead?
I've never received a newsletter ever.
Well, the survey is still open, so you could still take the survey in theory.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and this was another reason for this forum, was to try to continue to reach folks and make sure everyone knows about the housing plan process. And the survey is still open. There are actually 3 surveys. There's a resident survey, there's the college student survey, and the survey of folks who work in town. And they're all open.
Normally available on our website.
Yep, on the town website. And the other question was, Litchfield County includes very high income areas. Wouldn't that skew the income? So I actually think that I have to look at my median income data, but I actually think Winchester's median income the town's median income is actually pretty close to the county median. But I will look that up while somebody else asks a question. Anybody else have questions or comments?
I had gotten one in the chat, and I'll just read it aloud. The old brick buildings on the side of the Mad River, which have been vacant or appear to be the entire time I've lived in town, approximately 15 years, should be put to use or torn down. I know they have been attempted to be renovated at least once, with the developer dropping out due to vandalism. But those buildings would make great housing if they were properly renovated.
Great, good feedback.
Yep.
Those buildings, the two largest, have recently, in the last year, 6 months, been purchased. So we don't know as of yet exactly what the plans are, but they have been purchased.
And the back building is used for office space and that type of thing. The front building, there was discussion among a prospective developer about possibly using that for housing.
Okay. Just to quickly answer or address the last question. So the town's median income is about $69,000. And that's the household median income. The Litchfield County median income is $78,000. So it is higher than the town median. So that means that if, for example, you were looking at 80% of Winchester's median income, it would be probably, there'd probably be more people, more households than we're showing at 80% of the Litchfield County median. Allison has her hand up.
George has actually had his hand up way before me, so I'm gonna
Okay,
ask
sorry,
him if he
George.
would like go first.
Thanks. Go ahead, George.
Okay. Thank you for putting this together. And, we're involved with planning and zoning for nearly 20 years now. We've got some of the old mill buildings on Main Street here that some of them are impacted by contamination. So it'd be interesting if the state could somehow get involved with us in how we could remediate some of these properties and get these. There's one that's down at the by the community college that is actually a very attractive building. It's got great glass, very cheerful environment that could be housing for the community college students that would enhance the population there. But because there is some contamination that has been identified, how can the state get involved with us, Jocelyn, to look at some of these things to try to resolve it, to actually get these buildings back to be reutilized in a really important part of our housing stock? I think about what's being going on right now with the climate and doing away with fossil fuels. And there's all kinds of incentives to buy electric vehicles, but I am not aware of a huge investment and support for the infrastructure. So it's like saying we're going to start having televisions, so we'll incentivize buying televisions, but there's no input for creating the stations and the ability to broadcast. So everybody have electric cars, and we won't have an infrastructure to be able to support our grid. Is not going to be supported. It's history information already out there on California. They don't have an infrastructure to support what they've already got for electric vehicles. Well, the same kind of thing happens. We've got our zoning here in town, and we've got quite a bit of infrastructure for sewer and water, and our land value's been pretty competitive. But is there, with the input from the state and wanting to see us improve that, why aren't we investing some money to incentivize single family people that don't have the savings and so forth to be able to get into something that they actually could support with their income. We ought to be looking at things like that, not just in zoning regulations, because we've got, single family zoning here, but we don't have the massive, 3-5 acre zoning that some of the towns have. And some of that is driven by the infrastructure needs. You don't have sewer, you don't have water. So you've got to have a septic system and you've got to have a well system. So some of those things dictate the requirements for the land size for a single family home. So I think that there's something that we could get into that we're not taking care of with regards to the bigger source of income or resources that could come into the community and support expanding this affordability of housing because our properties have been pretty competitive, but we're not seeing the investment out here. So why is that? I don't know. But is there a way to get the state government to start paying more attention to, if they're going to throw money into communities, earmark it to stimulate those kinds of things to grow our ability to feed this, affordability of housing. Just another,
Yeah. Well, thank you. I will say there are a lot of state programs, especially now, and especially in relation to the American Rescue Plan Act funding, for example, designed to try to deal with some of those infrastructure issues. And there are also a bunch of state programs around remediating, mill buildings and other buildings. I'm pretty sure Winchester has taken advantage of some of those programs in the past. But I think you're right that we should consider some of the, talking about some of those in this housing plan and how we can tap into those programs to address some of those issues. Yeah.
Jocelyn, the other thing too is Winston and Torrington are the recipients of, people being interested. We got an infrastructure and will support, because we exceed the minimum that everybody's talking about, whether that's legitimate or not, as far as affordable housing. But your numbers obviously show us we're way under what we really need to be doing. But we also are the receiver of interest in, affordable housing because we have the, we've got the two largest populations in Litchfield County. And, so we should be spending a little more time, I think, and it's nothing to do with you, but the state should be focusing a little more energy in seeing us, instead of one size fits all, look at the communities that can support this and maybe do some, provide some incentives in some funding, because they've got the greatest resources to be able to help us in our smaller communities. So just another thought.
All right, Allison.
Hi, my name is Allison Shantz. I actually am employed through McCall Center for Behavior Health, and I do a lot of work with outreach in the community of Torrington, Winchester, all of Litchfield County, really. We're also in the middle of a huge opiate epidemic, and I was just curious on if there is any funding or plan within this plan for sober housing, for sober homes, or people that are suffering from substance abuse or mental health and things like that, and within the homeless population.
Well, again, I don't know what's going to be in the plan yet, because we're still in the middle of developing it. And that's why we want to hear from folks like you and others on the call about what you think should be included in the plan. And then the steering committee will, do its next, step of taking all of that into consideration. Typically, in the other towns that I've worked in, we have addressed in the housing plan the current resources that exist for households that are at risk of becoming homeless or that do become homeless, sort of directing people to those resources if they don't know about them. And in terms of those other issues, that's certainly something that the steering committee can take under consideration. I don't know if anybody on the steering committee wants to comment on that at this point, or.
Yeah, I would say that I would agree with what you said, Jocelyn. You know, not only in the steering committee, but sort of always and I'm the director of social services for the town. So sort of always in my daily work are thoughts and efforts being made around those populations for sure. But I love the idea of bringing it to the steering committee and discussing it for part of this plan.
And just to build off Katie, member of the steering committee, Allison, it sounds like you've got a lot more insight into the needs that the community that you're serving than we certainly do. So maybe there's some specific proposals you'd like to see or ideas that you know that work that you can bring to us and we can discuss as part of the greater plan, if that makes sense.
Perfect, thank you.
And thank you, Nick, for sending the link to the survey, which I put in the chat if anybody wants it.
Excellent. Looks like Pam has her hand up. Pam, I'm gonna, there you go.
Thank you. I too do casework. So like Katie, you've heard and it's pretty sad when we have, I've heard in this town of people, and they're older people that are paying almost what they get in Social Security for rent. I'm like, well, how are you paying utilities? Charging them. I hear these stories all the time. I know a disabled veteran in Torrington who's been on a waiting list for senior housing for a year. He's paying almost his full Social Security check on rent. So those are the kinds of, I think there should be a short-term solution and a longer term, because there are people in need right now. How can we address them? How can we help them? How can we provide them with affordable housing and quality? That was one comment I saw from the survey that I appreciated, was the quality affordable housing, because that's important too. So I hear these stories almost every day, and I think it's, if you go out there and you really talk to the people and people who do casework like Katie and Allison, you get a much bigger picture of what's going on.
You're absolutely correct.
Oh, and I just want to add one of my favorite, when I was looking for apartments, I grew up in Massachusetts and I lived on the other side of the river. And there was a beautiful apartment complex in Colchester that was partially CHFA funded. So they had 10% affordable housing. And for $600, I would have had, this was 20 years ago, the most beautiful apartment. It was luxury. There was a garage, walk-in closet, master bath, washer and dryer in the unit. So you can think small, you can think bigger, but those are things that attract people to the town too.
Thanks, Pam. Julia, you have your hand up.
Yes, I work alongside with Allison. I just wanted to ask the question is, has it ever been proposed to your town, a sober house, or, you know, what was the level of acceptance if it was, or homeless living accommodations, or has that ever even come to the table there?
So I can speak to the last year since I've been here. I'm not aware of any requests for any sober houses. I do know that sober houses are challenging in that they're not regulated, or some are and some aren't. I'm not sure of the details on that at the moment. In terms of homelessness, you know, the shelter that we do have available is at the YMCA in Winstead. But what most people don't understand about that is that you can't walk into the YMCA and say, hey, I'm homeless, I need a place to sleep tonight. You have to go through the 211 system, and you have to go through the coordinated access navigation system. So when you do that, you could say to 211, I'm homeless, I need shelter. They could offer you shelter in Waterbury, Danbury, Torrington, Winstead, wherever it's available. So oftentimes the shelter beds in Winstead will be occupied by people who are not from Winstead. And that is a whole nother system that the town, you know, doesn't operate. And it's actually a countrywide system, the coordinated access network. So, but in addition to that shelter, there have not been discussions that I'm aware of about additional shelter. And if there were, it would have to fall into that coordinated access system.
The conversation isn't as welcome as I would like it to be. I understand people want to get, you know, one housing, but they want it to improve their town. So they're being careful about who they want the housing for. And I understand to make it accessible to those they want in the town, but also we have a very big, as Allison brought up, epidemic out there that could be helpful to people trying to improve their lives. So I know this is I've been around it enough to know this is something that doesn't come to the table. And when it does, it gets shot down easily in certain towns, not yours in particular, just regular around the board. So thank you so much for your time.
Just so, George, go ahead. Maybe you want to address.
Well, I've just got a question. Through the recent years, the town has acquired a number of properties through foreclosure. Do we have a list of properties that the town of Winchester owns that might be an area that we could look specifically at to develop some of this housing that has been identified as such a need? But if that's something, Pam, we could isolate that. How much property has been, accumulated, and what property in that group of properties would be, appropriate for this? And that'd be something that I'd be like to look at myself, and then, bring to the commission in case we could come up with a special overlay zone or something like that that would be able to deal with that. It would be interesting. I don't know if we have much or what the quantity of it is, but it would be something I think might be helpful to this subject.
There were two near me that were torn down within the last few years. I don't know if there's any left.
No, we have a couple.
Okay, that's something we should address to see what's out there and look at that possibility. Okay.
Winchester does not have transportation as much as like buses and things like that, correct? They don't.
No, we have a senior bus. What is it? $1 a ride, right, for medical appointments and shopping. Katie, run through the senior center.
One option. Yeah, that's one option. There is the I don't know if it's still called the Candy Striper bus, but there is a regular bus route to and from Torrington and Winstead I think 3 or 4 times a day. And there's a new route that started up with the community college that goes into the evening. I think the last run is at 10 p.m. There's more. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was.
Okay, I was believing that there was nothing. So it's good to know that there is something, because I know for growing families and young adults that are trying to establish themselves and find an apartment and employment and all of that, transportation is usually a big issue, especially with the affordability.
It's not perfect, but it is available. People can get to Torrington. that people can get down to Stop and Shop, but it's by all means not perfect. I hear you.
Okay.
All right, I was just making some notes. Anybody else have any questions, comments, feedback for the steering committee?
I just
Can
think
I
it's
send-
good that it came up for conversation, that you guys are looking at this, because I think it's long overdue.
Can I put my email in the chat in order to coordinate with somebody?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you.
Terrific. All
Jocelyn,
right.
I know I'm a member of the committee, but can I share a note, somebody who tried to attend but had to leave to work tonight?
Of course, please do.
So there's a friend of mine who rents in the community of Winstead. She couldn't be here. She's got to work tonight. She described her experience as a pretty rough one, renting at Winstead. With the first 10 days of finding an apartment, bed bugs in there. So there's a fight between the public health department and her landlord for a long time to get the bed bug situation resolved. There's a furnace situation. And then it sounds like right after her initial lease ended, her landlord was trying to raise the rent 60%. They fought about it. They settled a 22% increase. Sounds like her landlord really just ignored the property. Has been jacking rent up pretty rapidly, and has been not really obeying her privacy too, causing inspections coming in with very little to short notice. So sounds like she really wants to call the community home, but because of really skyrocketing rent prices, she's worried that she's going to have to leave, and there's little protections to protect her as a renter.
Thank you for sharing that. All right. So again, I will just say on behalf of the committee, and you guys can come shout out too, that we are so thankful for your time tonight, for coming to this forum and giving your feedback, asking your questions. Again, those monthly steering committee meetings are open to the public. Allison will reach out to you directly. If anyone else wants to be contacted directly about future meetings, feel free to type your email address into the chat box. But again, stay tuned. There will be another meeting that will invite all residents to once the steering committee has a draft plan with some goals and strategies, and that one will be a little more interactive because we'll have some specifics to get your feedback about, and we can do some Zoom polling, or maybe we can even have it in person depending on how things go. Did any other mayor, do you want to say anything in closing, or?
I think we've had, a pretty good conversation tonight, and we need to keep it going.
Yeah, I just want to add that I appreciate everybody's attendance and input.
All right. Well, thank you all. Have a good night. And hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks for your time. Have a good night.